So, unlike The Thing, at least this movie didn't kill all the dogs. About that cat, though. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below. It'll give you a pretty good overview about what this channel is all about, but in short, we look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. But this is our Is It Syllabus-Worthy series. This is where you guys leave me recommendations in the comments, movies that I haven't seen before that you think I should check out. I check them out for the first time, and then I determine, are they syllabus-worthy? Are they worthy enough of being on the horror movie syllabus? And today, the movie we're looking at is Black Mountain Side. And Black Mountain Side was recommended by L.S. Gregor, aka my friend Lee, who actually recommended this movie twice. He recommended it in our Lovecraft videos comments, and he recommended it more recently on our Folklore videos comments. So that means Lee was serious that he wanted me to check this one out, and I paid attention. Now, Lee didn't tell me too much about this movie, but he did tell me a couple of things that were pretty important to know going in. The biggest one was that this is kind of a low-budget version of The Thing. And that's good to know going in to brace yourself, because otherwise you're going to be in for some side-eye when you watch the movie when you start, I'd say. And then he also mentioned that it had some really strong themes of supernatural things happening and the feelings of isolation, kind of the themes that you'd have in The Thing. And then he also mentioned that the low budget kind of hurts it a little bit. He also, in the Lovecraft video comment, he mentioned that there was some Lovecraft themes in there as well, which I'm glad he did. We'll get into more of that as the video goes on. But he did give me some things to have some expectations on. And I'm not 100% sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but we'll get into that when I get into the review. But it was what I had to go on. I didn't look at any reviews. I didn't look at the trailers, nothing before I watched the movie. I just sat down to watch it with only Lee's comments to guide me. And did I like it? Did I hate it? Let's find out. Like I said, the movie that we're looking at today is Black Mountain Side. Black Mountain Side came out in 2014 and was written and directed by Nick Zostakowski. And I have no idea if I'm getting that name right. It's my best stab at it, frankly. He's done a handful of films. This is not his only movie that he's directed. And I haven't seen any of them. I'm unfamiliar with his other work. And whether or not I should go and check into his other work is going to depend on how this all shakes out. But we're going to get into it in just a second. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is about a group of archaeologists who are isolated in a wintry northern area all by themselves to study an archaeological find. They found a new structure that may be a revolutionary find for the community, for science. And as they dig into it, things start to go wrong. Their guides and their workers start to disappear and leave, and they start acting strange, and things start to get a little bit more and more uncomfortable and dangerous, and hijinks abound. And I'm going to go ahead and leave it there so it's not spoil it any further. But the movie is very familiar right from the get-go. And why don't we just tackle that first? The elephant in the room, if you will, The Thing. Like Lee warned me, this movie is very much like The Thing. And it's very obvious. It's like got Thing envy. It's almost like a Thing ripoff. Like when the movie starts, you're starting out in this facility that looks more like a house actually than a facility, but it's this facility that is in this remote wintry area with snow and everything that's obviously isolated. And then it gets a helicopter approaching it, and like right off the bat, you're thinking the opening from the Thing. And I was even thinking, is this going to be like a remake? Is it going to be that much of a Thing homage, if you will? But don't worry, it's not going to rip off the Thing. It is going to be a little bit different, but there's going to be a ton of similarities, and that's both a good and a bad thing. The Thing is amazing. We've talked about it before on the channel. Every horror fan knows about it. It's beloved for a reason. It's a classic for a reason. So when you're making a movie that can't help but be compared to The Thing, you are setting yourself up to be compared to one of the greatest movies of all time, and that's not going to go well for you most of the time. And that is a issue here. That Thing envy, again, if you're going to, crib from the best, but on the other hand, when you're reminding me of a legendary movie, you're reminding me of a legendary movie, and you're not that movie. I could be watching that movie. So you're already stacking the deck against you a little bit. And then you've got a group of characters that are all going to be isolated together and have to interact with each other, just like in The Thing. And they are not nearly as charismatic here. They are not nearly as likable or connectable or relatable as they are in The Thing. And that's a challenge. It's an issue. It's very obvious right from the get-go that they want you to be thinking about The Thing. They want you to be thinking about these characters the way you thought about the characters in The Thing. I mean, they even have a guy whose name I think is Giles or Giles, who sounds like Childs, and he kind of looks a little bit like him because he's the black guy, So it's not trying to not make you think of that. It's wearing its influences on its sleeve, which I at least respect. They're not trying to hide the ball. They are being obvious about it. The issue is that, like I said, these characters aren't as charismatic, and the performances aren't the strongest. Like, every actor in The Thing is bringing an A game, and the characters, while not super well-rounded, it's not like you get a lot of character study going on in The Thing. You're given enough through the performances and through the interactions and the scenes that you care about the characters, you connect with them, you can differentiate them, and you like them. That's not the case here. You're not given any less time really with them as you would in the Thing, but you just don't connect with them in the same way. You can't necessarily differentiate most of them. They're not terribly relatable or likable. They don't necessarily make all the decisions that you would think would be normal to make. And so it really is a disconnect, and it's a big flaw for the movie. It's a big challenge because a large part of this low budget movie is conversation heavy. A lot of the action and stuff that's happening is happening off screen, presumably because of budget issues. So a lot of it's relying on exposition, conversations, interactions between these characters, and between the acting, which is not horrible, but it's not great, and the characters not being super connectable. It's not carrying the movie the way The Thing would carry the movie before all the cool stuff happens in The Thing. And it doesn't necessarily have the cool stuff. It doesn't necessarily have the effects and everything that The Thing has. And again, that's a bit of an issue because you're kind of expecting that because it seems like The Thing, and you're not going to get it. The special effects here are kind of subpar because, again, there's a budget issue here. That said, director makes the best out of it. He does a good job of showing just enough to give you the idea of what's going on and letting your brain fill in the rest, which is, it's kind of the Jaws school of thought. Like, let your imagination do the work. And it's the right move here, especially because he doesn't have the budget. And I want to credit the director because he has these limitations and he's making it work. He's doing a really great job of making this movie despite his low budget. The location that he's found is beautiful. It's really giving off that isolationist vibe, which is important to the story. And while it starts out like The Thing, it does really kind of switch into this slow burn mystery thing that it's good. It's working. It gives you the premise of what's happening fairly early on, but doesn't really spell it out for you and lets you wonder what is happening. Honestly, it's so technical and scientific in its explanation early on that maybe you kind of want a little bit more explanation so you can kind of understand what's going to go on or why these people are concerned. But I think it's enough to just understand that they are concerned and that they have these motivations. The motivations make sense in why they're going to do what they're going to do. And that's a good enough. And even though the director is not going to treat his audience like they're stupid, maybe they could have been treated they're a little bit stupid. It might have helped a little bit. We're going to get into that a little bit more, though. The camera work in the movie is very, very good. He shoots this movie really well. So early on, it's kind of open up, and it's you're getting the expanse of the isolation. And then as the movie goes on, it slowly gets increasingly tighter in the shots, a little bit more claustrophobic, a little bit more cramped. The shots get closer and closer. The space, the set, the location starts to feel smaller. People start to be shot more in tighter spaces. And you get that feeling of that isolation kind of crushing in or pressing in on you and feeling more and more alone and isolated and just kind of tight. And it gives that tension a really good boost, which is important because it never really reaches the same levels of tension that The Thing reaches. It doesn't have that kind of paranoia. It doesn't really nail that aspect of it. Between the dialogue and the characters and the performances, it never quite reaches those heights. So the director's doing a lot of the heavy lifting by setting the tone and the mood right with the location and with the camera work to make you feel that tension, to make you feel the isolation and the creep factor. And it does a great job of it. It really, really does. And it's got the Thing envy pretty hardcore, but there is this aspect of Lovecraft in there, like Lee had mentioned, which I'll be honest, if Lee hadn't mentioned it, I probably would have missed it. I wouldn't have picked up on it. But since I was looking for it, I kind of picked up. There's a little bit of a At the Mountains of Madness feel to some of this. Some of the stuff that's in there. I don't want to get into the plot too much. I don't want to spoil it too much. But there is a Lovecraft aspect to this that is there. And it's, The Thing plus Lovecraft. Not a bad idea, man. Not a bad idea at all. It's a fascinating idea, and it's kind of a complex idea because you're weaving together kind of two things that aren't necessarily disparate, but they're both kind of complex and kind of their own thing, and you're weaving them together in a way that actually makes sense. And then you're not spoon feeding it to the audience. And this is a key thing here. This movie is a bit ambiguous throughout, especially in terms of the ending and in terms of the underlying thing, the underlying threat. It's a little bit ambiguous, and it kept me thinking even after the movie was over. And it was important because this movie, it doesn't spell out everything for you, and that's actually great. Early on, like I said, it's a little frustrating because they're talking in a lot of technical speak, scientific stuff that if you're not familiar with those terms, you don't really know what they're talking about. And you can kind of go along with it, but you kind of feel like you're a little bit in the dark, and it never slows down to catch you up. It never does that. Now, you could argue that the storytelling falls a little short here because it's not giving you a lot of explanations. It's not necessarily spelling things out for you. And as a result, you may not always understand the motivations of the characters. But I would argue that maybe works for the movie. Like it's arguably an underwritten film. That you could make that argument pretty strongly. But I think that maybe works in its favor because by not explaining it so much, by not taking you by the hand and leading you through the movie, it allows you to have some different interpretations. And this is where the movie really shined for me. It really clicked. Like I said, this movie is smart, maybe a little too smart. It may leave some people in the dust. It kind of felt like I felt like I was getting left in the dust. And it wasn't really till I got to the end, and even after I started thinking about it later on, that I started to really get what was happening here. And what that was is there is a supernatural reading of this movie, but there's also a scientific reading of this movie, like a bacterial infection type reading of this movie, that is intriguing at the minimum and fascinating at best. And I found it to be fascinating. I like the idea that arguably everything we're seeing happen is realistic and not actually supernatural. That said, the supernatural aspect of this movie is also a really cool read on it. So you can take it either way, and I think it works. Like the effects of this movie are not super great, but the supernatural effects, the deer creature, looks really good. So again, the director knows just how much to show, just how much to hold back, and really made that work despite not having the money to make it work. But then adding this extra layer of there being an alternative reading of this was a really cool way to make this movie stick in my brain after the fact. Because I'll be honest, early on, I was kind of like, this is just a subpar thing. I'm not feeling it the way Lee felt it. I don't know about this one. But by the end, I was like, you know what? I think I might be wrong in that there might be more to this than I thought there was. But enough more to make it worthy of being on the syllabus? Let's find out. So, is Black Mountainside syllabus worthy? I had to think about this one for a while, but I'm going to say it squeaks out a yes. I'm going to just edge it over the finish line for this one. And I'm going to say it's because the intelligent ambiguity of this movie wins out over its shortcomings. Look, we talked about it. There is a lot of things about this movie that work against it, namely the comparisons to The Thing, because it's not necessarily a favorable comparison. A lot of times it falls short because of the other thing that works against it, which is its budget. It doesn't have enough money to do everything that The Thing could do, to its detriment. If we could have seen some more gore, some more other stuff that was alluded to or happened off screen, I think that would have benefited this movie. But the technique of the director, the camera work, the location, the setup, all of that stuff worked really well. The storytelling of a filmmaker was enough to combat his meager budget and provide enough of a mood and enough of a tone to make up for some of the other shortcomings. Like, I can forgive the subpar acting and the characters that are inferior to The Thing, and I can forgive the subpar effects, because I know what the budget is, and because this director is delivering a really solid product with all these things working against him. He's still pulling something out that's really, really cool. And adding this multiple readings, this ambiguous reading of the movie, this supernatural reading versus this scientific reading, well, that's just great. That's really what put it over the edge for me, was that option. Like, this movie stuck with me. When I finished watching it, I kept thinking about it. Partly I was wondering, does it make the syllabus, is it syllabus worthy? But also just because I kept thinking about what had happened and what it meant, and it just kind of stuck with me. So I started watching YouTube videos and stuff like that, and I saw this video about this reading about it being a bacterial infection, and really going into the science of the permafrost and the bacterial infection, the bacteria that's trapped in the permafrost, and what would happen if they got out, and how we haven't seen these for thousands of years, and we'd have no defense for them, and how the human body would react to them, and how they would hallucinate, and all the stuff that would happen. And it's interesting to see them go through this movie and show there is a scientific reading of this movie where everything that's happening is actually possible, could happen, is not supernatural at all. And I love that. I love the supernatural reading, and I love the scientific reading. And the fact that they're both in the same movie is a lot of fun. It made me want to go back and watch the movie again after watching this video, to look at it from more of a science-based perspective, and really take it from that way instead of looking at it from the supernatural perspective. That was just fun, and it makes the movie rewatchable, which I think is a key point in its favor. Again, the directing won out on this. The storytelling won out on this. Even though, like I said, some people might think it's underwritten, I think that worked in its favor. It didn't spoon feed you. It didn't spell everything out for you. It let you come to your own conclusions. It took you on a ride, but you don't have to take the ride that it's giving you. You can look at it in alternate ways. And I bet you there's even other readings as well. I haven't really had enough time to sit with it to think about if there's other readings beyond the two I've just mentioned. But if you have some, leave it in the comments below. If you've seen this, let me know what you think is happening in that movie, because I would be interested in hearing. Lee, let me know what your thoughts are on that. I think, Lee, that you read it the supernatural way, which is the way I initially read it. But I'm curious. Do you have any other readings of this? Does anybody else have any readings of this? Because this one is a trip. This is a cool movie that, like I said, it was on the edge. Could have gone either way, but I think it pulls it out. I would definitely say go ahead and check it out if you haven't checked it out already. And if you have, of course, let me know what your thoughts are, how you read it. So that is, in a nutshell, that is Black Mountainside. It was, it delivered. It delivered what Lee said it was going to deliver, and even a little bit more. So it winds up making the cut. So thanks, Lee, for recommending it. I appreciate it, because I did have a good time with this one, and I had an even better time kind of investigating it or researching it after the fact. That it really was a movie that kind of spurred me to do that. So that's a really cool thing. And now I'm spurred to look at a Horror Trivia Pursuit card, because it's that time where I'm going to go answer a question live on camera and hopefully not embarrass myself. And I'm going to pick a question from the psychological category, because, again, this movie does have The Thing envy. There's a huge psychological aspect to this movie. So we're going to go with that category. And the question is this. In the climactic pool scene, the titular entity of 2014's It Follows uses what form to attack Jay? I am pretty sure that I know this answer. I'm pretty sure. I love It Follows. We have talked about it on the channel. It's a fantastic movie. It feels like a throwback movie while at the same time feeling like something very fresh and original. And you could maybe debate both his points, but I definitely feel that when I watched it, and I've watched it multiple times since then. And I even watched a video about it fairly recently, which is why I feel like I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question. Now, if you haven't seen It Follows, first of all, what are you waiting for? You should check it out. But It Follows has this entity, for lack of a better way of calling it, that follows you. And when it does, only you can see it. The people around you cannot see it at all. And when you see it, it takes on various forms of other people. Sometimes people you know, sometimes people you don't know. Now, the thing about the movie is that it is all kind of it's ambiguous as to what's going on. It doesn't really spell out what the entity is, and the only rules you know about how it works are the rules that the characters are giving you in the movie, which is great. It doesn't want to, over explain itself, kind of like Black Mountain Side. It doesn't want to overwrite the movie. It doesn't want to spoon feed the audience, and that's what makes it so good. Amongst many other things, it's just a well-made movie. I have high praise for It Follows. The question is, do you know the form it takes? Again, I think I do. So if you haven't answered, if you have haven't got your answer locked in, lock it in now, because I'm about to lock it in. I'm about to explain my answer. So, okay, lock in your answer. So my answer is her father. I am like 98% sure that she sees it looking like her father at the pool. And I think it's not even so much that you see him, even though I think you do see him because you see him in pictures or something like that. But I think it's that she thinks she said something to her sister or something about it looking like dad or something like that. I'm like almost positive about that. So I'm going with father, and I'm not going to second guess myself on it. Her father is my answer, and the answer on the card is her father. Words for word, her father. So I got that one right. I'm feeling pretty good about that. But again, I do like that movie very much. It's one of the ones where I actually remembered that the character's name was Jay. I wasn't even surprised by that in the card. You know how big a deal that is for me. So got that one right. Did you guys get that one right too? Let me know in the comments below. And if you had wrong guesses, let me know those, because I enjoy your wrong answers. And if you haven't seen Black Mountain Side, again, check this one out. It is a thinker. It is interesting. Understand that it's got Thing envy and it's just not as good as the Thing. And if you just give it that mulligan going in, I think you're in for a really good time. Thanks again, Lee. I really appreciate the recommendation. I had a really good time with it. And thank you all for hanging out to the end of the video and for all the recommendations you've been giving. Keep them coming, because I'm enjoying this series. It's always fun to watch a movie you haven't seen before that you guys think is good and then let you know my thoughts. So keep them coming. Until next week when we do something completely different, I'm just going to say, class dismissed.